Hey everyone, I'm Sho, and this is the Count Off. Hey everybody, welcome back to Season 4 of the Count Off. I'm going to be your host, Sho, and every episode we're going to sit down and try and find the intersection between music and something interesting. At least we hope. This episode, we've got Tom Bergan from HeadCount. Now, HeadCount is an organization we've had on the Count Off in the past. A few times, actually, we've talked to Rachel Griffin-Jackson. We've talked to Kellen Edmondson many times. And so now this episode, Tom Bergan, brand new guest, new position, interesting conversation, I hope. And so they've been all about voter registration and participation, and I just figured it was a great way to kick off this season. We usually start with HeadCount as our kind of guiding light conversation, but as we'll talk in the news later on in the show, you'll see that this conversation with HeadCount is just the beginning. And so the Count Off, as you know, was once on WCUG, now it's part of Meta Modern. It's still going to air on WCUG Cougar Radio, but we are purely a digital product now, and I think it's really awesome. I love being able to make content with my friends and being able to make content for y'all in a way that's a little bit more, I don't want to say free, but I have more latitudes than I had before. So, of course, every episode throughout the season, we're going to be sitting down having important conversations about music and something interesting, whether this episode, that's HeadCount and how they use music and voter registration and kind of mix that together in interesting ways, or like we've done in the past and take historical looks at how music impacts, humanity in a way. Now, this particular season, I'm really having a focus on civic action. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. As I already said in the news, new show, new season. Some things will change. Some things will be a little bit different, but we're going to try and keep it the Count Off that you all love and remember. And just to kick off the season, I'm going to play a song from one of my great buddies, every single one of them at the Normas. I've had a great opportunity to work with them creatively, and it's been absolutely fulfilling to be able to do that. We're going to be playing their song Loose Lips, which is just off of their newest album. It is the closing track, so I guess we kind of end at the beginning. And I absolutely love the song. I think there's this rawness to it that it's just absolutely incredible. So coming up, we got Loose Lips by the Normas, and we'll be back with more of the Count Off.
Walked on down to the liquor store you like. The service clerk was way too nice. And still you're wondering what I'm doing with my time. I said I'm learning to unwind. Lamplight burns low, and you ought to go, but you never seem to pick up on your cues. She's shaking her hair now, look out, she's there a while. All I can do is strut. She doesn't buy into the smile. And still you're creeping all around that straggler's bend. When will all of the torment end? Your options had run low, and you ought to go, but you never seem to stick with what you choose. She's shaking her hair now. Look out, she's there. Whoa, all I can do is lose. Loose lips, huge hips, take me into your life till I'm feeling alright. Loose lips, huge hips, take me into your life till I'm feeling alright. The lamplight burns low, and you ought to go, but you never seem to pick up on your cues. She's shaking her hair now. Look out, she's there. Whoa, all I can do is lose. Loose lips, huge hips, take me into your life till I'm feeling alright. Loose lips, huge hips, take me into your life till I'm feeling alright. Loose lips, huge hips, take me into your life till I'm feeling alright.
All right, it's time to get in the news. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Count Off. You just heard the song Loose Lips by the Normas. Good buddies of mine, great musicians, great show. If you ever have a chance to go out and see live show. I mean, it's kind of crazy to have an episode of the Count Off where we're actually able to talk about live music, because when the show first started, it was in the middle of COVID. And so all the things that we were trying to provide was information on how to keep the music scene alive. I mean, in season 1 of the Count Off, we were talking about streaming shows. I remember I watched a Jeff Rodenstock live stream via Instagram, AJJ, Too Many Zoo, so many, musicians that we've seen through our phones. That was season 1. We were just getting our roots. We were just trying to figure out what we were, just interested in music and trying to share information about that love of music. And then season 2 came around. We became a digital product, and we really focused on this podcasting, this kind of more interview-based work. And we really did some amazing work. Madalena Castellana, the 16th Century Riot Girl, and our award-winning episode, little pat on the back if you heard that there. But no, I mean, it's just a really great opportunity that we've had at the Count Off to explore and to change and do so many things. And so you may be wondering, well, let me say it this way. You may be wondering, this is season 4. You just talked about 2 seasons. You're missing like a whole season. Well, in college, we don't have the opportunity to do 52 weeks of show. Instead, we did 10 to 12 episodes, as many as we could. And so season 1, season 2, that was kind of a semesterly show. Season 3 was our kind of special election day broadcast. So that's something that we kind of developed in between season 1 and season 2. I guess just kind of election cycles and everything. In season 3, here in Georgia, we had a runoff election. And so we specifically focused a whole day just on that runoff election. We did kind of a impromptu election day broadcast via runoff edition. So that was our season 3. It was kind of 16 hours of live produced radio with a lot of people from the community. And it was absolutely fantastic. So that brings us here, season 4. So what's going on, right? You may be wondering. At least I said out loud, so now everyone's wondering because that's how it kind of works. So season 4, I really want to get into this idea of civic action. Now in the past, we've talked about voting in season 2 and season 3. We talked about how voting was important to get the vote out, to be registered, and I still believe that very strongly. And if you aren't registered, you should be registered because those of us in Georgia, it's coming up. It's coming up, if not past, if you're kind of listening to this weeks after it comes out. But voting is one part of being civically engaged, right? I mean, voting is just, that one aspect. We volunteer. We pick up litter on the ground. I don't know. We help out those in our community that we deem need help. And so there are so many ways that we can actually be civically engaged and still have voting be a part of that, right? I think in 2020, a lot of our takeaways was this is the most important election that we'll ever have. And so everyone had to vote. And now it's 2024, and they're trying to use the same rhetoric, oh, this is an important election. It's like Syndrome said in The Incredibles, if everyone's super, no one is super. So if every election's important, no election is important. So I don't know. I'm trying to tackle this idea of we can't just have voting be the thing that we reach for as, oh, I'm civically engaged. Oh, I vote, right? That's not enough, I don't think. Not that, if you only vote and you don't have time for anything else, cool, whatever, But the idea that voting is the end of it all is not true, right? We should do better. We should support our local food banks. We should support our local economies. We should do everything that we can to volunteer any excess time that we have to build our communities up rather than to break them down. Not implying that doing the other is the case. But in season 4, I really want to explore that, tackle that, think about it, right? What does it mean to be civically engaged? And how can we bring voting kind of as a part of that? So instead of every election being the most important election, maybe we're just used to voting and we know when it's time to vote or how to make sure you're prepared to vote because we are civically engaged. And that means more than just, oh, I vote or, oh, I just volunteer, but maybe touching on a little bit of everything. So that's kind of my thoughts for season 4. I'm not entirely sure how that will go. Obviously, this first interview is really kind of kicking off what I'm kind of thinking is a learning journey. I'm going to try and have conversations with people that will help me better understand the idea of civic engagement. And if anyone listening here has a good idea, please reach out to us at MetaModern and let us know, kind of other ways. And I'd love to talk on the show because, again, in the past, we've really pushed voting. And in the past till now, I've learned that it's more than that. And so I want this show to try and be a little more than that. Interesting, right? I don't know. So season 4, I'm super excited. We're going to be having conversations about, I guess right now we're really going to be tied up in this civic engagement conversation. This interview that's coming up with Tom Bergan will kind of be a real kickoff about that. We're going to talk about voting, very broadly, and I try and break it apart, pick at it a little bit, and Tom brings me along and saves the interview in so many ways. So Again, thank you all so much for listening to the first episode of The Count Off. I know we usually do news here, so here in the news, you would usually have, music news, any kind of political news, any kind of cultural news that we think might be important for you to understand or to hear about or to know. But since the first episode, and since we haven't really had a podcast in like a year or more, I figured it'd be good to kind of catch everyone up and let everyone know why we're suddenly on season 4 when all of the media dictates we shouldn't. But anyways, we're going to go to another song real fast, and we'll be back with our conversation with Tom Bergan. We've got a musician that I absolutely love, Nick Bentley. Is another buddy of mine, great thinker, will probably be on the Count Off. By probably, I mean more than likely as long as he's available. But got an absolutely fantastic song, Rabbit Hole. He's always said, the original version is electric, and everyone hears him play it acoustic, and they say that they love it. It's pretty good. You got to admit. Rabbit Hole, Nick Bentley.
Well, he pulled out his lighter and fired up a smoke. He said, "Hey Jim, do you want to hear a joke?" Said, "I'm so far down the rabbit hole, I don't know which way is up. I don't know which way is up. 'Cause it's life, it's love, it's money, it's drugs. Not knowing who you are when you wake up. It's the bar, it's my car, it's the morning alarm. Oh, it's everything. It's nothing, but it's beautiful down the rabbit hole. Well, I knew a girl who used to smile. She ain't had a reason for a while. So I gave her a ride, some money, some gas. But her days of living have passed. 'Cause it's life, it's love, it's money, it's drugs. It's not knowing who you are when you wake up. It's the bar, it's my car, it's the morning alarm. It's everything, it's nothing. It's beautiful down the rabbit hole. Yeah, it's life, it's love, it's money. It's not knowing who you are when you wake up. It's the bar, it's my car, it's the morning alarm. Oh, it's everything. It's nothing, but it's beautiful down the rabbit hole.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Count Off. I'm your host, Sho, and you are now entering the part of the show that I like to call The Conversation. Now this part of the show, we just throw to an interview that I did in the past, so my voice will sound very, froggy, because I had to reschedule it. First time technology issues, and second time it was early in the morning, so I sounded like this pretty much the whole interview. So bear with it. And I hope you enjoy. This is going to be our interview with Tom Bergan in two parts, all about voting, especially in 2024. So again, I've kind of teed up how in the past we talked about how it was an important election and how this one is also important. And a lot of people feel some kind of way about that. So Tom and I get into that conversation and try and figure out what's going on. And I try and learn how best to, interact with people, especially, throughout this project, on how to get people to understand the importance of civic engagement or maybe to be better involved. So anyways, this is Tom Bergan from HeadCount. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Count Off. Now, this is the portion of the show where we interview someone much more important than me, much smarter than me, and much more passionate than I am in everything that they do. Today in the studio, we have Tom Bergan, the Senior Voter Engagement Manager from HeadCount, an organization The Count Off has talked to in the past. I'm super excited to have HeadCount back in the studio at The Count Off. Thank you, Tom, for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sho. And that introduction was so kind. I mean, I hope that I'm able to live up to the adjectives that you put towards my name.
I mean, even just from the brief exchange we had through email, I was like, this is the right interview. I'm
Perfect.
So happy to be able to sit down and talk to you. All the conversations I've had with HeadCount in the past have been really, evocative, really eye-opening, and it has really kind of set me on a trajectory for how the rest of my season usually goes.
Yes.
So as a executive or a senior member of HeadCount, there's so much going on in this election cycle in 2024. Obviously elections kind of wax and wane in popularity and everything like that. And so this one has its own, set of tasks that we as people interested in voting engagement are, really focused on. So what is HeadCount seeing, on the ground when you are talking to people? What are you hearing, and what are you going to do with that information?
Yeah, so I think that you put it perfectly. Elections wax and wane, and it really feels like this year is going to be one of those election cycles that's dominated by the waning feeling. And I think that we've definitely seen that. I think that a lot of voters across the spectrum, but particularly young voters, are really frustrated with the choices that they've been given for president. It's the same folks that they voted for in 2020. And it's kind of that feeling of, in 2020, the narrative was, this is the most important election of our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of, you can't use that language every single time there's a presidential election. And so I think that we are seeing that there's kind of a fatigue around the presidential narrative, and especially because the presidential primaries and the presidential election are what take up the majority of airtime in coverage around politics and this year's elections. And so I think what we at HeadCount are planning on doing is really leaning into everything else that is on the ballot, because every single person has a representative in Congress up for election. Over a third of the country has a senator up for election. Almost every state, by the time November rolls around, is going to have ballot initiatives that have to do with everything from abortion to taxes to education. And all of those things are things that people haven't been hearing about, but are important to voters. And so we at HeadCount really want to empower voters to realize it's okay if you feel disenfranchised with the president, because there's a billion factors that lead to that feeling of frustration and anger towards what has kind of played out in the presidential election. But we want to put that massive but in and say there's also so much more. And if you're someone who cares about your community, if you're someone who has issues or things that, you're just passionate about, there's going to be something on your ballot that relates to that, whether it's a candidate or a ballot initiative or even like local offices. And so I think that's the narrative that we're really going to be leaning into this year, because, you know, when we're out in the field, a lot of the times you get people who say, I'm not voting this year. And if you're given the opportunity to ask a follow-up question and say, what do you mean by that? Or why is that? That's when we're able to really have that impact of engaging with them, helping them realize that there's so much more than just the president on the ballot.
It seems as if that post 2020, going into 2024, as you said, you know, on a national presidential level, we have the same choices as we did 4 years ago. And it's almost like everyone's having this gut reaction to that again. And everyone's like, you know what, like, forget this election. I'm not interested. And I think that's such a strong sentiment that I've seen, and a large part of why I think this project and what y'all do is so important. A few things that you talked about engagement and how it's kind of dropped off, or there's less interest in the national politics. And I think that's what's really interesting about politics. I felt like in 2020, everyone got on board with voting. Everyone's like, all right, fine, I'll vote. But we'll vote for the national.
It was this big thing.
Yeah. And so we're in Georgia. And so immediately after the presidential election, we had our runoff immediately afterwards. And the conversation I had with a lot of locals, they're like, we just voted. What do you mean we have to vote again? And I'm like, no. The first vote was like the practice vote. This is now the real vote that actually really matters. And I feel like maybe we're having that same narrative. Like the last one was really the practice vote. Now in 2024 is a real vote, because as you said, your conversation is about how, I mean, because they say this in politics, all politics is local. And that's kind of what you're getting at. You're like, hey, like, yes, there is this national conversation about who will be the president of the United States of America. But there's all these down ballot issues, all these down ballot candidates that are also incredibly important in the political system, or in our, you know, mindset as far as voters go. My question out of all of that rambling is how do you think that me, you know, as this person, can engage voters in a local sense? How can I make them realize that the local is really what's important and where that impact is, and the national is just a part of the whole recipe that is voting?
So I really love that perspective that you shared of, like, you as a Georgia voter and voters in your community are so much more prepared for 2024 on a national scale than everyone else, because you all do have a system where in recent years, frequently, it's led to a runoff election, and you vote in November and then again in January. And most voters in this country don't really have that experience. And so I really, really love that framing that you have. And I kind of think I'm probably going to steal that when I'm talking to people in other states and be like, hey, you know, some states you got to vote 2 times in a row. And even, you know, I live near Chicago, and we have the mayoral election was in February of 2023. So it was just a couple months after November. And it was kind of the same sentiment of, oh, we're voting again. Mm-hmm. But I think in terms of a local level, the most important narrative is the fact that we've seen in recent years that state governments have more power than ever. And I think the most pressing example of that, and the most prevalent example of that that's at the top of voters' minds, is the Supreme Court's rollback of Roe v. Wade, because that directly put power in the hands of state elected officials, whether it's your state Senate and House, your governor, your state Supreme Court. They all suddenly got this wild responsibility of power in their hands that for decades previously was not something that they were ruling on or passing legislation about. And so having that understanding that that state senator that you're voting for that represents only, 50,000, 100,000 people is going to decide whether or not issues that are wildly important to most voters are going to be addressed, and ultimately addressed in a way that's signed into law. And I think that beyond abortion and the conversation around that, there's going to be a myriad of other issues that we're going to see that with. I think education is going to be another one. We've seen that the Supreme Court is willing to talk about and hear cases on education. And just with the way that the current Supreme Court often rules, they usually are putting more power in states' hands. And so I don't think this idea of states having an increased amount of power and influence over laws is going to go away. I think, in fact, it's going to be the opposite and become more prevalent in the coming election cycles. And so that's something that I think is a really useful way to convince people that local matters. I also think that one other narrative that's kind of different than that one of increased policy agendas and opportunities is simply the fact that local politicians are much more accessible than national ones. Odds are you are never going to meet your United States senator. And if you do, it's going to be in a very passing way at like some photo op that they're at or some organization they support that you're a part of.
If you got a baby or something.
Yeah, exactly. But when it comes to state elected officials and when it comes to your city council, those are people whose offices are just a handful of people and who will actually answer your calls. And if you wanted to meet with them or vocalize your concerns, they will hear them, hopefully, if democracy is working as it should, in a loud and clear way. And I think that that is also a really wonderful, unique, and overlooked opportunity for us as voters and as members of our community to tap into that, because we have to remind ourselves that our elected officials work for us. And in the local sense, us really oftentimes means just a vocal few, like the few that are willing enough to step out and say, oh, I'm going to reach out to my city council member and say, hey, why do I drive over 50 potholes on my way to work? And what are you going to do about it? Or, hey, my water is being turned off and I don't know why. And like all these local issues that are hyper specific to where people live can be addressed by elected officials. And as long as we remember that and empower people to lean into that, I think that there will be more engagement in a local level and more of a willingness to realize 2024 is about so much more than just the president.
The states' rights thing, you cited, why, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. There is this huge shift in politics going from this, and even in a sense, like it's not even that it went from being nationally driven to now it's locally driven, but now we can really see how important those local politics have become. I mean, I know HeadCount is very much in the battle of making sure that voters have the information they need to know how to vote. And states are varied, very, very different depending on where you live. And
absolutely
now, with states' rights becoming more of an issue, it's kind of the exact same problem that y'all are tackling, where there's all this varied information, like here in Georgia, for example, like most of the legislation happens in the beginning part of the year for like a few months and that's about it, whereas our understanding of, politics, the system of governance is really coming from a national perspective that, we go, oh, there's this 4-year cycle. Oh, there's this big thing that we do. And then we kind of chill out. But really what I feel like you're saying is that like there is this active government in our local community that is actively working. They're accessible, they're here for us. And it's not this big system far, far away that we only interact with every once in a while. It's here, it's local. And in a sense, it is more complicated because each state is varied in the ways that it runs things. And I guess we have to take that upon ourselves as, engaged, citizens. But I think also, as you say, there's something really interesting about being able to go to someone and tell them your feelings. And in a representative democracy as America would be, that's kind of how it should work, right?
Absolutely.
And so we need to almost retrain ourselves maybe, or get into the habit of like reaching out to our not local authorities, but our local politicians. Sure, our local authorities, if it's that kind of an issue, but our local politicians, and let them know, and they should kick it up the chain, right? So then kind of like when the national, groundswell shows up and there's this grassroots movement for something, there's also the political side has been also taken care of, maybe. I don't know. It's such a very delicate balance, don't you think?
It is. And I think another layer to this already wonky kind of maze that we're navigating is the fact that a lot of voters believe that lawmakers are wildly inefficient, because on the national level right now, they are. I mean, there was a statistic that I forget the exact number, but I think it was like 24 bills were passed into law this year by Congress on the national level. And on an average year, it's like 150. And you see a stat like that and you're like, oh my gosh, you just believe every negative stereotype ever about politicians, right?
Right.
And that's not true on the state level. Again, it's like, if you look at the laws that your state governments are passing and the breadth and size of some of these laws, it's night and day to what the United States Congress is doing. And so I think retraining ourselves about looking at politics from the ground up as opposed from top down is one part of the puzzle. But then also understanding that there are two completely different beasts between local government and the national government. And I think if we're able to at least move the needle on both of those perspectives, a lot of positive and change is going to come out of that.
So we've been talking, I guess, kind of like what's happening outside in the political environment. I'd like to kind of reorient back and kind of look at what's happening specifically with HeadCount, your audience. You're on the ground, you're talking with people and you're asking them like, hey man, are you registered to vote? And they're like, no, or they say yes. And then you're like, do you plan to vote? And they say no, they say yes. What are you hearing on the ground? How are voters, or even people who are not registered to vote, how are they engaging with their community? How are they ensuring that, if they're not voting, they're doing this, or if they are voting, they're also doing this?
Yeah, I think so. One thing that we like to talk about a lot is this idea of a civic engagement ladder. And basically the theory there is you are not going to wake up one day as someone who's never voted, never followed politics, and just get this like wild urge to run for office or to lead a march that day, right? It takes time to kind of get to that point. And of course, there are moments where organizers and community activists present themselves in a way where they didn't even know that they were passionate about this issue and it just comes up. And that's kind of a specific instance. But I would say the vast majority of people in this country follow this civic engagement ladder. And one of the first steps of that ladder is registering to vote. Because, where HeadCount is operating, which is concerts, music festivals, community events, people are not always anticipating being asked, hey, are you registered to vote? That might not be something that they anticipated being asked when they left the house to go see Harry Styles, But when we ask them that question, that is the very start of their journey, potentially, on that civic engagement ladder. Because even if someone says, oh, no, that's not for me, and we aren't able to get a follow-up question in, maybe their friend starts a conversation and they have an interesting 2-minute interaction on their way to their seats. Or even if someone doesn't engage with one of our team members directly, they see our table and they ask their friend, they're like, hey, are you registered to vote? And it starts a dialogue. And from there, people are actually registering to vote. And when you register to vote, you're giving yourself the opportunity to have your voice heard. And I think that's why registering is probably the most important first step that someone can take on this civic engagement ladder and journey. Because you can register to vote, wake up on election day and say, you know what, I'm not inspired by the candidates. I don't feel like these people are going to represent me. I'm sitting this one out. And that is a totally okay thing for someone to come to the conclusion to. But you cannot, in a number of states, wake up on election day and say, I'm not registered, but I want to go and vote.
Right.
Georgia is one of those states. There are many states across this country that require you to be registered before election day. And a brief aside, there are some states that do allow that. And that's a really amazing way to ensure that everyone who wants to be a part of the political process can be. So, having states have that same day voter registration where you can show up at the polls, say, I'm not registered, but I would like to be, and then you get registered and receive a ballot is like a really incredible way to take away one of the big barriers to engaging with politics and to becoming a voter. But anyways, that's an aside. But, once someone becomes a voter, it's a habit. It's a lifelong habit. Even if you begrudgingly do it, or it's a year like 2024 and you're kind of frustrated by the whole thing, studies show that voting is a habit. And so from there, I think that opens up the door to realize all these other ways that you can engage with your community, whether it's becoming an organizer and becoming involved in advocacy for a specific issue that you really care about, whether it's becoming that person who is writing your elected officials every single week, talking to them about the same issue or different issues or whatever you are caring about that particular day. I think it opens up a lot of different avenues that you can get to without voting, but voting makes it a little bit easier to realize that that's something that you might be passionate about. Because even someone who realizes that they feel disenfranchised from the electoral system and they don't ultimately want to cast their vote, they can realize that through voting and see that, they want to have their voice heard in their community in other ways, and that they want to organize in other ways outside of the ballot box. And so I would just say that voting is like that opportunity that opens up so many other doors that it's kind of like a choose your own adventure after that point.
I love that. Personally, I'm a big D&D person, but I like the idea that you said like voting is like building a habit. And then you talked about how voting is kind of like in tandem with all these other civic engagement, opportunities that we have. Like, it's not that I just only vote and I only volunteer. I can do both. And I love the civic engagement ladder. I've never heard that before. And so like, I like the idea. Basically, you're saying like, it's about being prepared to be civically engaged, because not everywhere allows us to just jump right in. And so you're saying, if anything, you just should be registered. Should you choose to vote or not, that's up to you on the day. But you at least have the opportunity, the right to vote if you're pre-registered or you register earlier on time.
Exactly. That and that hits the nail on the head of what we want people to do, because I think it's naive to think that every single person in this country feels represented by their elected officials and feels enfranchised in a way that allows them to come to the conclusion that they are going to be represented properly by these people that they're electing. I think that there are any number of reasons why someone would not feel that way. But I also think it's important to ensure that we have the ability to tap in if we want to. And it's really a shame that there are those barriers that prevent us from being able to tap in, one of them being strict voter registration laws. And so by being prepared, by saying, you know what, I'm going to give myself the option, I'm going to register to vote just in case, or in case I change my mind, or even if I'm not sure yet, all of those are incredibly valid perspectives to have as a voter, and particularly a young voter, because young voters, so much more than other demographics of voters, do not feel represented because their elected officials do not look like them. They are not the same age as them. And it's hard to feel connected to them. And so I totally understand why young voters feel disenfranchised, but it's silly to take ourselves out of the game. Instead, we should sit on the sideline and then make that decision based on the info that we have,
Yeah. One thing that I thought was really interesting is this idea of building the habit. All right. And that does it for the conversation with Tom Bergan from HeadCount. I kind of thought of that as my first attempt at trying to get around what the new season of the Count Off is going to be. We'll see in future conversations how that goes. Let me know how I did as an interview. I don't know. Well, maybe don't let me know. I don't know if it's going to be mean. But let me know what you thought about the interview. Let me know where I should go, who I should be talking to, what I should be thinking about, what I should be reading. I want to be civically engaged, and by doing that, it requires, a level of buy-in. So by all means, if I missed something or if you want me to elaborate more, you got to let me know. Again, I've been your host, Show, here on The Count Off, Season 4, Episode 1. Really cool to say that. It honestly is. I want to thank again the Normas, and thanks to Nick Bentley for letting me play their music on the show, their songs Loose Lips and Rabbit Hole, respectively. Now you can find me, Show, on social media at Show Podcasts sometimes. I really hang out on Instagram. I'm starting to do TikTok. And you can also find my company that I made with my friends. I didn't make it. We made it. And we are so happy about it. We're so proud of it. At Metamodern Prod, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Austin would love that. Please, if you get a chance, if you like this show, we have a lot of other video products as well. Metamodern Roundtable, our casual talk show. Food Fight, the best show ever. All about eating fast food and getting down to the nitty-gritty through food math. And then also we've got Cougar Feud, our little take on a well-known show. Shameless plug zone. So well done, don't you think? Again, thank you so much for listening. Some final thoughts on the way out. This has nothing to do with the episode or the show, but have you noticed how insurance commercials are all really funny? I don't get that. I don't know why insurance commercials have to be so funny. Geico's funny. Liberty Mutual is funny. I get that insurance is not fun or funny, but it's one of the only kinds of products like that that gets away with that kind of humor level. I don't know. Y'all tell me. Y'all got to tell me a lot. Y'all got to tell me how I did as an interview. You got to tell me what to read. You got to tell me what you think of commercials. But hey, I'm Show. This is The Count Off. And I just always want to say, with much, much love from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being with me on this episode of The Count Off, Season 4, Episode 1. I'll be back with another episode very soon. Take care of yourself. Take care of others.